This begins CD number 5.
Inshallah, wanted to look at the beginning of Surah An-Nisa, because we're going to begin, inshallah, with the huquq in marriage, which are the rights. And for every right, there's obviously a corresponding responsibility, because whenever you have a right, you have somebody who's responsible somewhere for fulfilling the right. So if I have a haqq, something that's due to me, who is it due from? For instance, it's a haqq that Allah provide for you. That's a haqq of the servant. But the responsibility also, Allah has taken that responsibility, but it's a haqq of Allah that He's worshipped. So whenever you have a haqq, you have a mas'uliyah that goes with it. I mean, you can't find a haqq that doesn't have some corresponding responsibility. So with the huquq in marriage, you'll always have the haqq and then the responsibility that goes with it. And it's one of the short-sighted aspects of Western civilization, is that the focus has always been on huquq, on rights, and not on responsibilities. In Surah An-Nisa, which is a Madani surah, and everybody knows that the chapters are divided into Madani and Mekki, which is a division related to time, not place. So the Meccan chapters are chapters that were revealed before the Hijrah, even if some of the verses were revealed outside of Mecca, and the Medinan chapters are revealed after the Hijrah, even though some of them were actually revealed in Mecca. So that's the differentiation between Mekki and Madani. And you also have Mekki in Madani. So you have Meccan ayahs in Madani surah. So it's a very interesting phenomenon. And the importance of it is the shift that occurs after the Hijrah, and also related to Nasikh and Mansukh. If you want to know if something has precedent over, one verse has precedent over another verse, if there's any type of outward disagreement between the two verses, then you'd have to look which one was revealed first. And Imam Ali radiallahu anh actually had a Quran that was the ayahs as they were revealed, but it was lost. But he actually wrote the entire Quran out in accordance with the actual time and place that the ayahs were revealed. The next thing is that a chapter, is the word that it's called is mentioned somewhere in the verse. So this chapter is called Surah An-Nisa, and the other thing about it is the chapter headings are always about things that Allah has exalted. Even if it's the ankabut, the spider, or the ant, there's something exalted in it. And Allah says that He doesn't, لا يستحي أن يضرب مثلا ما بعوضة فما فوقها. You know, that Allah does not restrain from even using a gnat as an example. So anything that Allah has named a surah after it, because it has something, some very important meaning here. Now, this chapter begins Ya Ayyuhan Nas, and generally that is a Meccan indication, even though it's not always, but generally that is a Meccan indication, because the Quran generally addresses everybody in Mecca. And then in Medina, it usually addresses the believers specifically. And this is the phenomenon of moving from the da'wah phase of inviting people to the deen, and then once a group has come into the deen, then it becomes incumbent upon them to actually practice the deen. So the Ya Ayyuhan Nas is to everybody. Ya Ayyuhal Ladina Amanu is to those who believe. So this begins with Ya Ayyuhan Nas, and it's important because when Allah says Ittaqu Rabbakum, Ya Ayyuhan Nas Ittaqu Rabbakum, that He's talking to everybody, not just the believers, because the first degree of taqwa is taqwa shirk. So that is the first level of taqwa. And taqwa is waqayatun nafs mimma yadurruha fil akhirah. That's what taqwa means. It's the protecting the self from anything that will harm it in the next life. That's what taqwa is. So when you say, have taqwa of Allah, what it means, guard yourself by being obedient and within the parameters that Allah has delineated for you in order that you don't harm yourself in the next world. And this is a cause-effect relationship. In other words, if you do this, this happens. It's not that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has emotions. Allah is not petulant. He doesn't get angry like human beings get angry. They're not, that's all anthropomorphic. And when you say the ghadab of Allah, the ghadab of Allah is His adab. And the adab is something He created, and it's as simple as that. Whether people believe it or not, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. People, whatever you believe, if it's congruous with reality, then your belief is a sound belief, right? But if it's not congruous with reality, then your belief is irrelevant. It's a false belief. So a true belief is a belief that is congruous with reality. And given the fact that we don't know all of reality, there are beliefs, there's things we don't know that exist, and we don't even know them. There's even creatures that we haven't discovered on this planet out there. There's animals we don't even know. There's things on the bottom of the ocean, they don't know what's down there. So you can say, I don't believe there's any creatures down at the bottom of the ocean. If they're down there, your belief does not alter the reality of it. So if I say I don't believe in a punishment from God, it doesn't alter the reality of the punishment if it is indeed true. So he's talking to everybody. Ittaqu rabbakum. And Rabb is used here. Ittaqullah is used. And ittaqu rabbakum. Rabbukum, Rabb is closer to the human being than Allah. Because Allah is a transcendent name. It has no immanence in the world. There's nothing in the world that when you say Allah, you can say that you have an understanding of that. I mean, there's verses in the Quran that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is fariqul habbi wa nawa, you know, that He's the splitter of the date seed and the stone, and that is Allah that does that. But there's no attribute that can be associated with Allah. Whereas Rabb is something that you can understand in the world, because Rabb is, you have Rabbul Bayt, which is the father, Rabbatul Bayt, which is the mother. And Rabb, some of them say it comes from Rabia, which is to grow. And Rabba means to nurture or to cause to grow. So that Allah is the one that nurtures or sustains or helps. And that's the loving relationship that Allah has with His creation. So that's why you have in the Surah An-Nas, قَلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ. It begins with Rabbin Nas, which is children. That's what children understand. It's like your parents. And then Malikin Nas, which is when you move into adulthood, you become responsible now. So Malik is the one who, his authority realms in the world. So now you're in the realm of laws. Children aren't in the realm of laws. They're in the realm of tarbiyah. You're nurturing them to prepare them for the next stage of consciousness, which is that you're responsible. And that's Malik. And then you have Ilahin Nas. That's the last phase, which is going beyond. It's seeing that Allah is more than just an authority. You see, Allah is more than just the giver of laws. That you don't worship Allah because He is the Malik. You worship Him because He's the Ilah. That's the highest stage of worship. That's over everything, because that stage of worship is the stage where you recognize that He's Ahlu Taqwa. You know, that He is worthy of this maqam. So when He says ittaqu rabbukum alladhi khalaqakum, there He said alladhi khalaqakum, there's a reason in and of itself. That's why He's saying Rabb and relating it to khalq. So there's the Rabb, and then there's the Khaliq. So He's the one who's your Rabb. He's nurturing you, but He also alladhi khalaqakum. He created you from nothing, which is what khalq means, to bring out of nothing. You didn't exist, and now you exist. And He did that. And He's sustaining your existence. He created a space in which you exist. He created all this exchange that's going on in you, anabolic, catabolic. It's all happening because of the Rabb. Min nafsin wahida. He created you from one nafs. I mean, Allah did that. So all of it, you look around, I mean, all you have to do is look at two, go back. Well, you look at Fatima and Ali radiallahu anhu. The two of them, and then you look at their offspring all over the world. Right? So from two people, there's tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of people that have a relationship because of those two people coming together. So the original nafs, which is this nafs that contained, that is Adam alayhi salam, but contains Hawa. That original soul that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created that contained the potential for differentiation, He says that He created you from one nafs, وَخَلَقَ مِنْهَا زَوْجَهَا, and then He created a pair with it. So that nafs was split, and that's the way a cell works as well. It's a mitotic division. So you had the split of that original soul, and it mitotically divides into two souls now. And then from those two souls, you get this exponential, and suddenly it's human beings everywhere. And all you have to do is just fly in an airplane over this continent and look at all those land masses with all those creatures living in houses and all their problems, and unbelievable. And then He says, وَبَثَّ مِنْهُمَا, that Allah did that. You see, Allah did that. بَثَّ مِنْهُمَا. He's the one that dispersed them. You know, that He's the one that caused this whole thing to happen. So He's not only reminding us that He's the cause of the origin, but He's also the cause of anything that comes from it. And there's a beautiful hadith in Imam al-Bayhaqi in which he says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ صَانِعُ خَالِقُ كُلِّ صَانِعٍ وَصَنْعَتِهِ. Allah is the creator of every manufacturer and what he manufactures. In other words, it's Allah who creates not just the human being, but the human being that is a maker of things. So anything you make, Allah made it. You see? And just like that He created those first two selves, He also created everything else. So that negates the deist philosophy. There's a deist philosophy that God started this whole thing and then just let it go and disconnected from it. That is a philosophical position in theology, and that's rejected. It's Allah continues to do it. بَثَّ مِنْهُمَا رِجَالًا كَثِيرًا, many men, وَنِسَاءً. And this is also an amazing thing, because if you look at it, there is almost equal, the men and women. And this is one of the dangers of what's happening now, is that people are beginning to learn how to choose what they want. Do you see? But if you leave it alone, the way that Allah intended it, it's balanced out. Now there should be, there are many more males aborted by spontaneous abortion than females. And that's been studied. Because you have the XY and the XX, and there's actually more of a XY, the Y to the X phenomenon in insemination. But there are more abortions. But Allah keeps this thing balanced. So He made rijalan kathiran wa nisa'an. And there are times when He will also, you'll get an extraordinary number of males born and an extraordinary number of females. That's happened. It occurs. You know, there's people that have a lot of sons in certain areas. I mean, if you do your bell curve, they'll all work it out, how it's all but you do that, and you'll find also that there's a hikmah in that, when He gives a lot of people sons. And then towards the end of time, the hadith says that the women will predominate. And some say those are metaphorical for the loss of qawamun, the loss of people that maintain and do the things that men are supposed to do, because men are responsible for the outward and women are responsible for the inward. So the collapse of the outward responsibility indicates that there's no men. And then back to wattaqullaha, and this is important because, see, women is all about taqwa. That's why the chapter begins, it's all about taqwa. The whole foundation of the relationship between women and men is about taqwa. You see, because taqwa is about guarding yourself from what is going to harm you. And the thing that will harm you more than anything else on the Yawm al-Qiyamah is dhulm, is oppression. Nothing will harm you like dhulm. The worst dhulm is towards Allah, which is shirk. I mean, you can't harm Allah, you can't oppress Allah, but you can oppress His haqq. You see, because Allah has a haqq. And because of the status He's given the human being, He's given you the ability to even oppress His haqq. Right? I mean, that's one of the biggest proofs that God exists is those who oppress His haqq and they're still walking around. And that's a proof. So when anybody says, I don't believe in God, they're a proof that God exists. You see, just the fact that they're there saying, I don't believe in God, that's a proof that Allah exists. That's why they're a sign. Somebody who rejects Allah is a sign from Allah. Because Allah says that those who are arrogant, He won't let them see His signs. So for the believer, it's so clear. And when he hears the one rejecting, why is he rejecting? Because kibr, it's arrogance. And that's why it's taken away. He can't see it. So when he says, اتقوا الله الذي تساءلون, the one who you ask one another. See, when we ask, even in this culture, it's becoming less so. But people used to say, for the sake of God, for the love of God, do this thing. That's what people used to say that. When they asked you something, they would say, for God's sake, do this for God's sake. Because that's the highest moral appeal that you can make, is to ask somebody to do something for the sake of God. And that's the same with the Arab. The Arabs say, unshiduka billah. I'm asking you by God. Billah. Unshiduka billah. Alladhi tasa'aluna bihi wal arham. And also you ask the arham. Tasa'aluna bihi wal arham. And then also, because it's mansub ala attaqullah. So don't just have wiqaya, don't just protect yourself from things that harm you because of your stinting on the rights of Allah, what you owe to Allah, but also, which is also a haqq of Allah, but it's a right of the womb itself. So have taqwa of the womb. In other words, fear the rahim. And there's a hadith in which the rahim spoke when Allah created everything, and the rahim is a reality. The womb is, these are the archetypes. Some of the scholars call it a'yan thabita, the source forms from which everything comes. Like milk is a source form somewhere else. There's a perfect milk and knowledge and everything. So the rahim has a source form. And in the hadith, and it's a sahih hadith in Al-Bukhari, in the hadith it says that this source form, the womb that Allah has created, is mu'allaqa bil arsh. It's actually connected to the throne of God. The womb connected to the throne of God. And the womb said to Allah, هَذَا مَقَامَ الْعَائِذْ بِكَ. This is the maqam when those who seek refuge in you. So this maqam, when all these created things were in the presence, the divine presence, the womb spoke and said, this is the maqam of those who seek refuge. And the womb wanted refuge from qati'ah, from being severed. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, isn't it enough? Aren't you pleased that I have said, whoever severs you, I sever him. And whoever maintains your bond, I maintain a bond with him. And you reflect on that meaning. You see, now the secret of this, how does this begin? اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة. You're all from one nafs. So all of you have a bond. This is the womb that we all came from, is the womb of Hawa. Everybody walking around on the earth came out of the same womb. And what we're being told is the womb has to be protected. The bond of the womb. In other words, all of you people walking around, your brothers and sisters. Bani Adam, Ya Yuhan Nas. So don't sever those bonds. Because those bonds are from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's the one that made those bonds by making you from one source. One creative source, which is the womb, the rahim, which is rahmah. شققت اسم الرحم من اسم الرحمن فمن قطعها فقد قطعته. I have derived the womb's name from my name Ar-Rahman. In other words, the womb is derived from his name Ar-Rahman. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allah derived the womb's name in Arabic from his name, the merciful. Irhamu man fil ard, yarhamkum man fis sama. Have mercy on those in the earth, and Allah will have mercy on you. And mercy is fawq ila al-asfal. It's from up, from below. That's where mercy comes from. Mercy is from up to down. It's not the other way around. Mercy is the mother with the child, because the mother is stronger, has full consciousness, and can neglect. She can leave a child, she can abandon the child. The mercy is in the weak, is showing. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ said there's not a prophet that didn't take care of sheep. Why? To learn how to be merciful, because the sheep are the weakest of domestic creatures. They're not intelligent at all. They'll just go wherever you take them. You lead them into the wolf's den and they'll follow. So mercy is towards those who are weaker than you. And this bond that Allah has made is a bond of Bani Adam. And this is traditional tafsir. It's not my modern interpretation. This is traditional tafsir. Is it لِأَنَّ الْكُلَّ أَخٌ من آدم وحواء. That's what Al-Barsawi says. لأن الكل أخ من آدم وحواء. Everybody is a brother from Adam and Hawa. And this is the meaning of the hadith. لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه ما لنفسه. None of you believe until he loves for his brother what he loves for his own soul. Imam Nawawi says ويشمله الأخوة في الإنسانية. This includes the brotherhood of humanity from Adam wa Hawa. But this haqq is la siyam al-mu'minin. That's how they say. But especially believers, because they have two haqq. They have haqq of teen and haqq of deen. Right? Al-mu'minun lahum haqqani. Haqq ad-deen wa haqq ad-teen. Teen is the earth that bonds us. That we're bonded in earth because we're from the same earth and we're from the same womb. The womb represents the earth. I mean, it's the matrix. And the deen is from heaven. So when you meet a believer, you're bonded celestially and terrestrially. So each bond has a haqq, the earthly bond and the heavenly bond. And that's why the believer is al-aqrabun awla bil ma'ruf. See, it says those nearest to you are more worthy of your haqq, the right that they have upon you. The nearest to you are the believers. It doesn't mean the others aren't near, but they're more distant relatives because they're from a different millah. So if you have a Jewish or a Christian or a Hindu or a Buddhist, they're from other millal. They're not from our millah. They're still brothers and sisters, but not in deen, in teen. You see, not in celestially, but terrestrially. And that's why you have to still maintain those bonds. And that's why if they don't oppress you, you don't oppress them. If they don't aggress on you, you don't aggress on them. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ, in his relations, he had good relations with everybody. Everybody. Jews that came to him in Medina, there's many stories. He treated them good. He treated them well. He treated the Christians well when the Christians visited him. He treated ambassadors from other peoples well. He treated everybody well. And then he says, Inna Allah kana alaykum raqiba. You see, that's the point. That's the whole reason that you have to be aware that these huquq that you are commanded to fulfill, they're being recorded, whether you're doing it or not. You see, you have responsibilities in the world, and one of the signs of the world is that they catch up with you. If you don't pay your bills, it's very uncomfortable, right? That it'll catch up with you. If you buy something and then don't pay for it, if you try to steal something, anything you do, it catches up with you sooner or later. And that's just dunya muraqabah. That's the monitoring of the dunya, of this world. It's not divine monitoring. I mean, divine monitoring, that's the ultimate security system, because there's no glitches. Right? The angels don't make mistakes in their recording. There's no fudging, nothing like that. There's no forgery, because the hands testify. So you can't say, I didn't do it, because the hand said he's lying. He made us do it. You say, I didn't kill him. No. He made us do it. We didn't want to do it. They don't want to do it. You see, they don't want to steal. A hand does not want to steal. It doesn't, I guarantee you, the hand does not want to steal, because the hand knows, at some level, they know what it means. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He says, Inna Allah kana alaykum raqiba, He's saying, do this and know that I'm seeing whether you do it or not. So I'm commanding you to do it, and then I'm seeing whether you do it or not. And this is not like the father who tells the son. This is the Lord of the heavens and the earth telling His creatures to do something. And an intelligent child will obey the father. If the father says, do this, the child will do it, and know that the father is going to come back and see whether he did it or not. So this first verse is the muqaddimah. It's the introduction to what is coming next. And this is one of the secrets. Fakhruddin al-Razi says the greatest secret of the Quran is the relationship that one verse has with another. That's one of the secrets of the Quran, because sometimes you can't see the relationship, but the relationship is very deep. So this is all an introduction to marriage, because that's the foundation. That's how this whole thing started, and it's how it continues on, and it's going to ultimately be the most important relationship in your life, because it's going to determine, if you have children, it's going to have in many ways a major impact on those children. It's going to have an impact on everybody involved, the two families involved. Marriage is deep in that the impact of marriage is very, very profound and moves out. It spreads out. And if you reflect on your own marriage and the coming together of yourself with another person, and the impact that that has, the people that it impacts, and then just your own experience of life and your spouse's experience of life. So if that relationship is not sound, nothing in your life is sound. It's just not. If that's not working, then nothing is working. It's a disaster for everybody concerned. So this is the introduction of taqwa, and the last one is the taqwa of muraqabah, which actually considered the highest level of taqwa, is the taqwa of muraqabah. So, and there's 5 levels of taqwa, and the first one is in the first ayah, taqwa rabbukum, everybody ayyuhan nas. That's taqwa shirk. That's the first level. The second level is taqwa al-kaba'ir, and that's the maqam of attaqullah mastata'tum. Fear Allah with what you're able to fear. Everybody's able to avoid kaba'ir. That's not something that's difficult for people unless somebody's in a deep state of ghafla. If they're in real heedlessness, they'll fornicate, they'll drink, they'll do those type things. But the majority of people are able to avoid kaba'ir. That's taqwa al-kaba'ir. Then taqwa al-sagha'ir, avoiding the lesser wrongs, which this is the beginning of haqqa tuqatihi, obeying Allah as He deserves to be obeyed. Of guarding yourself in a way that really is appropriate to the relationship of the abd and the sayyid. And then the fourth one is taqwa al-mubahat, which is avoiding the mubahat, which are permissible things. And that's a level of the zuhad and the ubad that are worried about their hisab on Yawm al-Qiyamah. And then the final one is taqwa khuturi ma siwa Allah ala al-qalb, fearing that anything other than Allah should occur to the heart, which is maqam al-muraqabah really. But this one is in specific in relation to the huquq of the rahim that you have to have taqwa of Allah, especially in the arham, in your bond, kinship bonds. The first ones are the mother and the father, and then the uncles and the aunts, and then, grandparents, granduncles, grandaunts, and then down, extending out. Your older brothers in particular, older sisters, and then younger. It goes out, extends out, cousins. And then it moves out. It keeps moving out until you get to everybody, because it's all from Adam and Hawa. So the rahm extends out. It keeps going out. But the first and most important is the mother, and then the father, and from there on. But that's how it works. So if you're not doing those close ones, you're certainly not going to do the far ones. Right? I mean, wars are just extensions of domestic violence. It's just extensions of it. The problems began in the house. That's where all this madness began. It's just extensions. That's all it is. And human conflict is all infantile behavior. It's all infantile behavior. It's people that haven't matured, because it's a failure. I mean, if you use violence, it's already a capitulation. It's a failure to use something higher, which is reason. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ never sought violence. He said, "La tamannu liqa al-adu." Don't desire to meet your enemies, because it's a failure. And that's why he would exhaust all the possibilities before he would go that route. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So he says, وَآتُوا الْيَتَامَ أَمْوَالَهُمْ, and give orphans their wealth. And this is, orphans here is also representative of anyone who's in your authority, that you have their money. But in particular orphans, because they're the weakest. They have no parents to protect them. And so when you have orphans that you're taking care of, Allah is saying, give them your wealth. And that's a protection of the weak again. If you're going to protect the orphans, you're certainly going to protect other weak people that have more power than orphans. And that's why Quran is always, if you look at it, the principles are always rooted in the lowest common denominator. You see, they're always rooted in the lowest common denominator, because if you'll do that, you'll certainly do it with things that figure in higher. So don't devour or consume the wealth. وَآتُوا الْيَتَامَ أَمْوَالَهُمْ وَلَا تَتَبَدَّلُوا الْخَبِيثَ بِالطَّيِّبِ. Don't exchange the foul for the good. If Allah's given you something good, don't make it foul. So don't make fair foul. If you're entrusted with the orphans, don't betray that trust, because whatever you get from it, it's not tayyib, it's khabith now. And one of the things that the Prophet ﷺ came was لِيُحَرِّمَ الْخَبَائِثِ, in order to prohibit those things that are foul. And khubth is the opposite of tayyib. It's the opposite of tayyib, what's pure. And Allah loves pure, and He hates the khabith. Right? Allah hates the khabith. And He even said, لَا تَقُولُوا خَبُثَتْ نَفْسِي. Don't say my nafs is khabitha, because it's such a horrible thing. Right? But say your nafs is lazy or something. But don't say khabitha, because you don't want to be khabith. وَلَا تَأْكُلُوا أَمْوَالَهُمْ إِلَىٰ أَمْوَالِكُمْ. Right? So don't devour their wealth with your wealth. Because see, what happens is, when you're taking care of the orphan, you can mix. So you can invest in the orphan with your wealth. And then what happens is, you begin to devour, like you're not giving them their due. So you utilize their wealth, which is their wealth, and you should be taking care of it. And then, إِنَّهُ كَانَ حُوبًا كَبِيرًا. This is a great wrong. Hub is a dhanb. It's a great sin to do that. وَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تُقْسِطُوا فِي الْيَتَامَى. If you're afraid of not being the equal with these orphans, in dealing with their wealth. And here it's marriage, because what the Arabs did traditionally was, if they had an orphan, and this, because it was a clannish society, often if parents died, the father died, and this happened a lot. I mean, there was higher mortality rates. A lot of women died in childbirth. Husbands died in sicknesses, journeys, also in clannish warfare and things like this. So what they would do is, if they had an orphan that had money, they would marry the orphan. The orphan's under their authority. They would marry the orphan in order to get the money. So this was something that was common in the Arabian Peninsula, was to marry the orphan in order to add to their own wealth. And also because what they would do is they would give them a very insignificant dowry or something like that. So Allah is saying that if you're fearful of doing this, أَلَّا تُقْسِطُوا فِي الْيَتَامَى, then فَانْكِحُوا مَا طَابَ لَكُم مِّنَ النِّسَاءِ, then marry from other women. Don't marry orphan women. If you're going to oppress them, don't marry them. And this is again important, because if you won't do this on the weakest one, you see, because if you have a yatima, she's an orphan, she doesn't have anybody to protect her, and you're going to oppress her. So if you're worried about oppressing her, don't go there. Marry somebody that you're not going to be able to do that with. So again, it's going to the least common denominator. Because here's a woman, but also an orphan. And there's two weaknesses, and that's the majority of women. I mean, there are strong women and in terms of relationships with husbands, but generally in the world, the woman is easier to oppress. And to deny that is just, it's a type of just denial about the real world. So it's a problem. So Allah says, إِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تُقْسِطُوا فِي الْيَتَامَى فَانْكِحُوا مَا طَابَ لَكُم مِّنَ النِّسَاءِ مَثْنَى وَثُلَاثَ وَرُبَاعَ. اثنين, right? 2, 3, or 4. And this is for khiyar, it's choice. Again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins with 2, 3, or 4, but then goes back, because it begins in khiftum, right? About orphans. Then marry from other women who are not orphans, 2, 3, or 4. فَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تَعْدِلُوا. But if you're afraid that you won't be just between those, see, you were worried about not being just to orphans, and now you have the possibility of marrying 2, 3, or 4 women. If you can't be just with them, فَوَاحِدَةً, then just marry one. All right, so that's the command there, فَوَاحِدَةً. أَوْ مَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ, which in certain historical situations that verse applies. It's not applicable now. ذَلِكَ أَدْنَى أَلَّا تَعُولُوا, because that will prevent you from being unjust. Ala here means, if you say ala al-mizan, it means that there was imbalance in when you weighed something, it means it was imbalanced. Or you say ala al-hukm, jar al-hukm, it was unfair judgment. So ذَلِكَ أَدْنَى أَلَّا تَعُولُوا, because that's better if you don't, so you're not being unjust. In other words, to marry one. And this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave, this is considered mubah, it's ibaha, which is ta'addud al-zawjat, or it's actually a polygyny. You have polygamy is either male or female, and polygyny is multiple wives, and polyandry is multiple husbands, which has occurred rarely. In very few societies have you had polyandrous societies. Very few. It's occurred a few times in history, but the vast majority of societies have been polygynous. The overwhelming majority of civilizations have been polygynous. Christianity was originally a polygynous tradition, and it was banned by the Emperor Justinian. So early Christians had more than one wife. So it's not, for Christians to say it's not part of Christianity, it's not true. I mean, it came in with a Roman emperor, and then it became the law. And it's become the law, and one of the ironies of this culture is that they allow the most bizarre relationships. I mean, you can have, if people are happy about it, a person can live with 3 husbands or 2 wives or 4 wives, as long as they don't legally do anything. There's nothing, nobody's going to take you to court. So if somebody has 3 or 4 women that they have a relationship with, he's not going to have any trouble in this society. But the minute you give one of those or all those women legal rights within the relationship, then it's declared unacceptable. And that's really what this is about. It's about establishing legal rights. Because the phenomenon exists. It's always existed and it will always exist. As long as men are walking around the earth, you're going to have men that have relationships with more than one woman. But what Islam is saying is you have a legal responsibility. That's what it's about. It's about haqq. So you cannot just abuse a woman on a road trip, or you can't set her up in an apartment, which is the way the Europeans do it. In France, I mean, it's very common for wealthy men to have a mistress. That's what they call it. They even have a word for it. And it's an old English word. It's not new. You know, Islam it's a practical religion. It deals with human beings as they are, not as they should be. I mean, there's always the should be there, but it deals with them as they are and then makes that as they are as it should be, given they are like that. That's what Islam does. It takes human beings as they are, not as they should be, but it makes the as they are as it should be, given that they're like that. That is what Islam is doing. So it's saying that people do this, do it like this. Make it halal. Give the woman her rights so that she has recourse. Now, within the Maliki madhab, you know, a woman can stipulate that she doesn't want to be part of a multiple marriage. And that's a sound stipulation in the contract. So even amongst the fuqaha, that exists. But generally, this is for ibaha. And Allah's saying, if you fear, and there's a hadith that people who had two wives and weren't just to one of them, they come and half their body is paralyzed on the Yawm al-Qiyamah. And there was one of the Salaf who had, he would do everything. He would weigh like food and things when he would distribute food for the wives, because he was so worried about the haqq of the wives. وَآتُوا النِّسَاءَ صَدُقَاتِهِنَّ نِحْلًا, and give the women their dowries nihla, as a fariḍa. This is a fard. It's a gift, but give it, it's a fard. And it's part of the millah. The nihla here can also mean the millah. This is the millah of Islam, that we give women a monetary gift, something of value, before the male marries him. فَإِن طِبْنَ لَكُمْ عَنْ شَيْءٍ مِّنْهُ نَفْسًا فَكُلُوهُ هَنِيًّا مَرِيئًا. This is a beautiful way of saying this. If the women are pleased, you see, طِبْنَ, and again, it's, you know, she has to be طيبة about it. She has to feel good about this. If she wants to give you some of that dowry from her own self, there's no coercion. And that's what it means. If her nafs feels good about it, then there's no harm in using that. You can use that if that's what she's chosen to do, but woe to you if you oppress her in that, if you take that. And there's a beautiful Shaykh from Morocco who lived a few hundred years ago. He was a qadi at Kiki. He lived in the mountains of the Atlas. And he wrote a beautiful book in which he considered it haram to allow families to distribute the inheritance to the women. That it should be done through an official like a qadi or something like that. And the reason that he did that is because there were so many women being deprived of their inheritance in the Atlas Mountains by the clans. So what would happen is when the father died, the brothers would come and force the woman to sign her properties over to the brothers. But he wrote this book, and that's the beauty of Sharia. You know, there's always people that know that it's wrong and they rise up to defend it. That's the beauty of Sharia. Oppression has never been justified in Sharia. There always been ulama that they won't justify it. And that's what he did. So that's one of the reasons for that, is that will happen. There are people that force the wife to give up her money. Haniyan Marian. And then وَلَا تُؤْتُوا السُّفَهَاءَ أَمْوَالُكُمْ. And this goes, you know, الَّتِي جَعَلَ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ قِيَامًا. Don't give fools your money. And the fools are the mubaddirin, people that are extravagant, that don't know how to utilize money. Which is interesting that it comes after that. I mean, it can refer to men or women. The mufassirun, some of them say it refers to the women, but the Mufassirun say it refers to men or women, but after that it's like, don't give your wealth to fools. So that's almost telling the woman as well. You know, if you have a dowry, you know, that's your money. Don't give it to, if he's got all these schemes, you know, just, we're going to be rich. I just need to invest it in this or that. And there's people that do that all the time.
This completes CD number 5.